afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session. My name is David Keene. I'm the Executive Director of CEX2018 at the Center for the Arts. And we are here to talk about healing arts and also inclusion. We have a very interesting and very esteemed panel of speakers, and I'm looking forward to engaging in a conversation with you guys and with them. I'm just going to read a blurb about the session to sort of set the context. The arts play a major role in healing, connecting, and self-expression. Art therapy programs that work, access, and inclusion in the arts for people of all abilities, and the personal impact the arts can have on individuals will be discussed. Learn how to develop programs that help others with physical, emotional, and mental health issues. This is a very broad, complicated topic, and I can speak from personal experience at CEX2018 Center for the Arts that through our collaboration with Cape Cod CAN, which is the Cape Cod Collaborative Arts Network, which is now over 5 or 6 years that we've been affiliated. I'm still learning things every single day and finding some of the conversations, like difficult to get started. So that's one of the things I'm hopeful for here today. I'm going to introduce each of the panelists first, give you a little bit of information about them. We'll go alphabetically, and then if you can be thinking about what might pique your interest in terms of a question. And I'm going to ask them each to speak a little bit about their particular area as it pertains to the topic today, and a bit about their background. So we're going to start with Melissa Kenny on the end, who is the director of the Cape Cod Collaborative Arts Network that I just referenced, vice chair of Plymouth Bay Cultural District, Plymouth Developmental Disabilities Citizens Advisory Board member, co-founder of New Heights at Algonquin Heights, co-president of Healthy Plymouth, a member of Healthcare Literacy Partners in Prevention, and a Plymouth, Massachusetts patch volunteer. So Melissa, that's very impressive. Over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I think I'm just going to joke that I'm maybe one of the only people here today that is not an artist, not a performer. I come into the arts kind of backwards. Through my son. So back in 2001, I think, my son was taking classes at Plymouth Community Arts Center, which then was Yellow House Studio, founded by 2 Cape Cod artists, Chris Riverty and Jackie Reeves. And it was at a time when I was a little burnt out from human services. My background is in rehab counseling. And I just thought, I want to immerse myself in this organization, hoping that by osmosis, maybe I would develop incredible talent. And I'm going to tell you that that has not happened. However, the love for art, the love for what artists and performers do, the benefits that I saw within my son, I kind of took into human services. So, as I said, my background is rehab counseling. And I've worked for a multitude of organizations, a United Cerebral Palsy, Specialized Big Brothers Big Sisters in upstate New York. Before starting with Cape Cod CAN last September, I was the Associate Executive Director for the ARC of Greater Plymouth, where I also ran the Family Support Program and created all kinds of social work programs, a lot of them centered around art. The benefits that I saw in the individuals that I served was incredible. And so when an opportunity with Cape Cod CAN came up, I thought, what better job than to meld my love for the disability field with the arts? And how can we make an impact on that? So if you're not familiar, Cape Cod CAN is an organization, again, in partnership with the CEX2018 Center for the Arts. It was started by a man named Jim Hurley, who actually retired as I was coming on board. It was originally in collaboration with VSA in Massachusetts. It used to be Berg Special Arts, not anymore. and it's an incredible organization. So the model was such that Jim forged relationships with about 20 different organizations on the Cape, serving individuals with developmental, intellectual, and physical disabilities. He was a man who loved theater. He had a family member with an acquired brain injury, and wanted to see how he could impact young people in the arts. You know, what impact would that have in their development, in their life, in employment going forward. So all that being said, that was the original model of Cape Cod Camp. We would have educators and performers going into these day residential programs and providing curriculum that we developed. When I came on board a year ago, I'm an advocate, and I'm a growing advocate about inclusion. And it just felt that maybe there was opportunity to now change the programming around a little bit so that while we still have those relationships with these agencies, and they're extremely important, what can we do to offer community-based programming? What can we do to, I guess, forge the impact of their talent, to have people understand that talent is talent and that disability really doesn't play in that, it's inherent in all of us. And so how can we bring that to the forefront, and what can we do so that there's an opportunity to see art created by somebody with a disability as art first, to have that artist or that performer be person first, artist performer first. And so that's what we're doing, and that's what we're going to continue to do. And I think that in the past year we've seen incredible growth, not only in the numbers of people participating, but in the programs that we're offering.
Thank you, Melissa. If you can pass the microphone all the way down to the other end. Next in the alphabet is Kari Lang. And Kari is the mental health counselor, expressive art therapist at the Dean Center for Tick-Borne Illness at Spalding Rehab in Boston, where she also directs patient programming and outreach. When tick-borne illness knocked her out of a career as an elementary school teacher in 2010, Kari knew she had to change her lifestyle and her career path. While undergoing rigorous treatment for her illness, she worked toward a master's degree in counseling and expressive art therapy at Lesley University. Serendipitously enough, the Dean Center for Tick-Borne Illness opened its doors in 2015, just as Kari was graduating. And she has been running support groups, wellness workshops, and providing individual counseling and art therapy there ever since. Kari believes that the creative arts can facilitate healing by giving meaning to challenging experiences and by also connecting the mind, body, and spirit. She is a member of Spalding's Integrative Medicine Task Force and recently started a complimentary outpatient Reiki program for patients at the Dean Center. And I actually highlighted this next part. I found it very, very interesting. Kari believes that the arts can play a pivotal role raising awareness for invisible diseases like Lyme, and that art can be used as a form of activism in the fight for affordable medical care. It's very intriguing. She's super passionate about the concept of post-traumatic growth and the role that creativity and community can play in one's ability to heal. Kari, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. Everyone here, the stories that I've heard and the accolades that I've heard from everybody that's done such wonderful things is really inspiring. So I guess what I want to share today, first of all, I guess I was driving down here. I was like, I'm not going to be very good with my words today because my heater broke. I woke up at 2 in the morning and my apartment was 90 degrees. So, but also Lyme can make it really challenging to speak eloquently because your executive functioning is essentially shot. So I was like, this is not really the most ideal time to be speaking in front of a group of people, but I figured it would be also an opportunity to put that, yeah, exactly, to put that out there and just say, I struggle with my words sometimes, and I feel like I have great ideas, and sometimes I try to spew them out and they make no sense. But that's exactly why we're here today, right? Is to talk about how art can help us with those challenges, and art can really make the invisible visible. I can communicate ideas through art that I might not be able to share through words. And I think that's what's so powerful about the invisible illness community. And what I try to bring with my patients, also it's healing to them too. On the way over here too, I stopped at my parents' very briefly on the way here to drop my dog off. But I looked on Facebook briefly and saw Avril Lavigne's video, Head Above Water. She just released a new song, she just released a new album. And for those of you who don't know, she was struck with tick-borne illness, Lyme disease, about 5 years ago. And she said she spent 3 years in bed, and in her most troubled time, she turned back to writing. And her song, Head Above Water, is such a beautiful metaphor for her experience of illness. And it's also so funny too, because I direct support groups at the Dean Center, as mentioned, and I've had a few people like ask me, do you know what Avril Lavigne did to heal? And I always say, like, I don't know, you know, because we saw her a couple times, like, doing a show. Like, I follow her on social media. You see her, I've seen her a couple times, she must be better. And it's just so funny because she's now coming out and saying, like, I've been sick this whole time, and, you know, we don't know because, you know, she looks okay. And that's such a troubling thing about invisible illness, is people sort of assume that you feel okay because you look okay. And I always say this is like one of the only times in life where I don't want to be told I look great, you know, if I'm not feeling well. I want to be acknowledged. And so I think art can do some really powerful things, and I'm really excited to talk more about that today.
Excellent, thank you so much. And if you could pass the mic one over to Eve. And Eve Montague is from the South Shore Conservatory. I hope I pronounced that correctly, I didn't, yeah. Eve is the Director of Creative Arts Therapies and the Chair of the South Shore Conservatory's Creative Art Therapies Department, and a member of the voice faculty. She received a degree in music education from the University of Western Ontario, where her music therapy equivalency from Western Michigan University, and her Master's of Science in Management from Emmanuel College. She has been with the South Shore Conservatory since 2008. She is a board-certified music therapist working for over 25 years with both children and adults in educational and vocational settings, implementing a diverse range of programs. She is skilled in instrument adaptation and modification, as well as adaptive technology and access. She is the director and conductor of the South Shore Conservatory Community Voices, a performance ensemble serving individuals with developmental disabilities. Eve is a trained facilitator in the Remo Health Rhythms drum protocol and a certified Music Together teacher. She is also the president for New England region of the American Music Therapy Association, and also serves as the internship committee representative for the region. She has supervised and trained music therapy interns for the past 12 years. Eve is an experienced staff trainer and presents extensively throughout the state, regionally, and nationally to music educators, music therapists, parents, and other human service professionals. She is also a guest lecturer at Berklee College of Music. As far as performance goes, Eve is a soprano, a member of the Plymouth Festival Chorus, and she was music director at the St. Joseph the Worker Church in Anson. She is active in local community theater and past president of Bay Players Theater Troupe. So Eve, it's really an honor to have you here as well.
Thank you very much. I should shorten that bio. It's dated these days. Since that was written, I've actually been board certified music therapist for 33 years, so I've been doing this a long time. I'm truly blessed to work at the South Shore Conservatory, a community music school, where community is really the heart of everything we do. And our main focus is access. We want everyone who wants to be involved in the arts to be able to have that opportunity. And so part of my job is to look at ways to remove those barriers, whether they're financial barriers, geographical barriers, or just plain access based on how the individual might learn. And we know living on, I'm obviously on the South Shore and on Cape, that, you know, geography is really challenging for us. Transportation is a huge issue. So bringing out the arts to the community is about 80% of what we do at the South Shore Conservatory. Music, for me, is the great equalizer. I see that with the other art forms as well, but because I'm a music therapist, that's my tool, and I really see it as the great equalizer. There's really no wrong answer in using the arts and or music when you're working with people who learn differently, and we all learn differently. So when I say that, I mean each one of us, myself included. Music truly has healing powers, the arts have healing powers, and it's because our bodies are wired for art, which is one of the only things it's wired for, really, when you look at it. I work with children who are newborns right up through our most seniors of seniors and end of life. And we know that music itself, and when you pair music and movement too, that helps. But music itself is the only thing that repaths in our brain. So as our brains shut down because of disease or trauma, music has the opportunity to find different ways. And I just use as a quick example, if folks remember Gabby Giffords, just a few years ago, who had a gunshot wound. She regained her speech with a speech therapist, but her primary therapist for speech was a music therapist. And it's because music was the tool that found its way through our brain. And even though her speech centers had been damaged, music found a way in our brains. I'm not a neuroscientist, I don't understand everything that happens in our brain, but I know that music happens all the time in our brain. So that's why everyone can access it. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are in your life's journey, music can be accessed at any point in time and can provide a variety of things. It can provide reinforcement of skill, sometimes acquisition of skill, maintenance. It can help reduce anxiety. It can help with relaxation. It can help with some form of communication when you can no longer communicate using your verbal skills. It can help with motor movement. It can help with social skills. So there's all these areas that the arts encompass and are just a natural fit for every single one of us, because really at our most human element, we have a right to the arts.
Very good, thank you. And if you could pass over to Andrew. Before you start, I wanted to say a few words about Andrew, who...
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, it's hot. And I want to introduce Andrew's mother, Leslie, who came, who she didn't intend to sit on the panel, but we were having a conversation at lunch, and we kind of insisted because I think that you will have some important information to provide. A little bit about Andrew. He is, for Andrew, art is a tool for personal and social growth. He believes that art is a medium he can use to advocate for people with disabilities. He is a painter, a poet, a photographer, and he chooses the media which offers extraordinary avenues for self-expression while sharing his own insight and perspective with the viewers. His work is available through the galleries of Art Living Inc. and Heart and Soul. And I love this sentence in your bio, Andrew. He does not let the fact that he was born with Down syndrome deter him from developing his passions. While Andrew speaks a little bit about his own journey as an artist and the value of art and poetry, we're going to be showing some of his work behind him. So, Andrew, the mic's all yours.
All right. Well, thanks, Dave. Thanks, Eve and Kari for your glorious and beautiful speeches. I just really want to say that I'm really tickled, and want to thank Dave again for this glorious opportunity to speak about myself to you and everybody. And I also want to thank Leslie Weatherly and Tracy Fraser as well. Alright, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, and also I am about the challenge that I've had since the years gone by. Well, anyhow, I come from a very artsy background. As Dave said, I paint, I write, and I photograph. I also am an advocate for persons who don't believe in abilities, and teach them about what it's like to have all these gifts, in fact, one of the panels who really inspired me today was Laura. You were really amazing. And so anyhow, my background is that I come from a very artsy background. I paint, I photograph, and write. And anyhow, yes, my stuff is available everywhere. I was in England. I still am in England. I'm also in Boston through art lifting. And anyhow, and capabilities. I also want to thank James Barnes as well. And anyhow, my story is that it's been since 2014 since my business was starting and anyhow how I founded it was lying back and along and thought, no, hey, I thought this might be a good idea to start getting artsy and painting and writing poetry. Also to music as well. So anyhow, one of my biggest challenges that I had was freshman year in high school. I was a victim of being bullied for the longest time, and nobody even cared. And anyhow, I knew who I was through the I knew who I was and what I really was, and nobody seemed to know or care about it. Also, I've been a young teacher at our stable. Also, I've been a teacher with her at our stable since I was in high school as well. And just last year, I retired. I work 2 jobs for a biggest retailer and supermarket. I also am a coach for my challenger program through basketball. And just last year, I am presented an award to a couple other volunteers through the high school. And anyhow, I just really want to acknowledge two of my brothers who coached with me since basketball for years, and they were John McVeigh and Austin Aparici. I love you two very much, and on to her, this is Leslie Weatherly.
Great, thank you, and thank you very much. Could you talk to us a little bit about what we were speaking about after lunch in terms of the contracts and the business part of which is how all artists go through this journey of trying to balance, the creative process and then who's there advocating for shows and contracts and those types of things. Can you speak a little bit about that? Your mom?
My name's Leslie Weatherly, and Andrew and I have been together a very long time here.
Yes.
He's always been artistically wired that way. We found pieces of poetry. I found little pieces of poetry all over the house. And in the beginning, like, who's writing this stuff? You know, because it certainly was not the way he would speak. It wasn't the way he'd communicate. And painting then became a passion.
And just also after that. And then also after that. So anyhow, through my writing, how my writing was discovered was actually when I was a young victim of being bullied for the longest time in high school. That's how I revealed and released my inner emotions and my anger behind it. I also played tennis as well, so anyhow, that was also behind the writing.
That's great, thank you.
But as his painting began to emerge and different opportunities presented themselves, most importantly through VSA International, in 2014, Andrew was selected as one of the artists to participate in the journey. There's 25 artists, underage 25 rather.
If any of you ask me what one of my favorite pieces are, I will tell you it's an oldie, but a goodie piece. I love his Evan's Ale Face.
So VSA then really made me aware of the fact that, yeah, you can put your work together, and now we have painting and we have all this poetry, and photography was one of the tools that was giving him an opportunity to participate in school in challenging situations that he would not have been able to participate in, but that protective camera in front of him opened those doors. So how do you put that together as a package to say, this is really who I am? I'm multidimensional, so you can't just, quote, judge me on one piece of work, which then opened up the whole business angle of being an artist. How do you manage that? How do you read a contract, understand what it says, understand what you're signing and going through it? So that's really the partnership that he and I have in our group, is helping him navigate the business angle of being an artist. And reading through and trying to find opportunities to go out to, he uses his art as a tool to advocate for persons that have disabilities, but his advocacy is to show an ability in each and every one of us. His art's been recognized from the Smithsonian through VSA International over to the Salford Museum in Manchester, UK. He's still over there. He just finished the Bi-Arts Fair in Manchester. And these are all things that there's a mechanics that has to go behind it. But I don't think that understanding those mechanics is necessarily limited to somebody that is considered a person with an intellectual disability. That mechanic, I think, has to be most artists. A lot of people who are artistically talented might not be business oriented, and vice versa. So it comes to that. As Andrew said before, writing is probably the most important phase of his artwork. Through his poetry, through writing, and he writes every single day, he's able to translate some of that into paintings. He's able to translate some of his paintings into poetry. But it's provided him with an uncanny release of emotion. And that's what writing really is all about, is that you're able to put on paper what you might not be able to articulate. Or maybe that you don't even know you need to articulate, but somehow that pen gives you permission to be able to do that. So.
Great, thank you very much, Leslie. But Melissa, before we open it up to questions, I did want to go back to you for one moment and talk about, in terms of your advocacy on the part of inclusiveness, and that my impression is there are two primary challenges, and one is the education of people who are presenting work to the general public and what inclusiveness actually means, and then the other is often barriers in terms of funding and transportation, because so much of what, in terms of what we do, there are a lot of evening and weekend activities that are often challenges to provide inclusive opportunities for artists with disabilities. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So there's a saying that true inclusion is there's no inclusion, which sounds kind of crazy, but true inclusion is just that, you know, we're all together. We all have equal opportunity, we all have equal access. And we were just talking at lunch, it's kind of a struggle and a conversation that's had. When you are somebody with a challenge and you are an artist, you know, as I said before, we want that person first, that artist first. And you don't want somebody to look at a piece of art and say, oh, that's such a beautiful painting for somebody with Down syndrome. You know, it's a beautiful painting because it's a beautiful painting. And talent is talent. But as we were talking at lunch, the struggle is if you take the disability out, does that negate educating the public? And so by having this beautiful work by Andrew, is that raising awareness of the capabilities, the potential, just the inherent talent that we all have regardless of a diagnosis. So it's a kind of a tough conversation, it's a balance. So I guess when I'm thinking about inclusion, for me, it's that anybody can go to any gallery or, you know, any jury show and submit work. And when you submit your work, you're not putting on a piece of paper that, you know, I have X, Y, or Z as a diagnosis. But if I have X, Y, and Z and it's a visible disability and, you know, you see that, does that change things? I would hope not, but does it? So equal access, everybody should have the opportunity to audition for a show. How do we support that, I think, is the biggest question. What needs to be put in place? We were having a conversation, my coworker Katie Paul, just yesterday we were talking about a show, and you know, if a character has a disability, you know, should we make an attempt to make sure that people who are auditioning potentially have a disability? And then what happens if you don't? What happens if you cast somebody that is able-bodied? Are you prepared if you did not open up that audition to everybody? Are you prepared to address that? And so then the question was, well, gee, you know, is there a lack of stamina? You know, like what would it take for that person to be successful in that role, or for that person to be able to create this amazing work of art? And I think that as we talk about inclusion, that's something that maybe art centers, art educators, you know, need to think about. What accommodations can be put in place that aren't hard? You know, they're easy. For instance, if you're casting a role, if I think of Billy Elliot, you know, the tap dancing kid, I mean, there were 3 kids or 4 kids that were cast in that role. So why couldn't you do the same thing if you know, there's a physical issue? So I think looking at that. In terms of the people that we serve at Cape Cod Can, the barriers is certainly transportation. Try as we do to, you know, have art programs and activities and field trips available on evenings and weekends. If they can't get from point A to point B, then they can't participate. And that's a nut that we really have to crack. Access. Do individuals know that they can submit their art? I mean, I think for the people that I serve, they would probably think not. And so is the language something that we have to look at, that it's very clear that this is open to everyone? You know, if you don't know that you can bring a piece of art somewhere, why would you? You know, and so in that way, you know, there's an issue with inclusion. So access, accessibility. We were talking, I live in Plymouth, and so we have so many buildings that are grandfathered, you know, for ADA because of the historic. But that immediately creates a barrier for people who use mobility devices and being able to access. I don't know.
Right, and just to add to that, for you know, some of you may know that we're in the process of hopefully turning a former service station next to our property into a ceramic studio, and you know, there's just not, you know, we have to raise the money, about $250,000 to make that building ADA compliant. So because we want to, don't get me wrong, but there also isn't, funding. There are very few funding sources that actually help us, make we can make our buildings accessible. We can, work towards access on our end, but it's often, still a quite burdensome with so many levels.
Right.
So, yes, Eve.
Just make a case about access.
Sure.
We start with the ADA and making sure that our buildings are fully accessible, but access is so much more than just a building. It's our materials, it's our language, but it's also the attitude. I work in a community music school, and we've gone to great lengths to train our front of house staff, our registrars, to know how to work with every individual that comes into the building. So whether you're using some sort of wheelchair for access, or whether you're an individual who might have early onset Alzheimer's, or whether you're a child who's on the spectrum, or whether you're a middle-aged woman coming in looking for service, how do you treat these people, and is it a welcoming environment? And that goes back to the education and advocacy piece that is hugely important. So your buildings can be beautiful and fully accessible, and we still may not be getting all the people we want to come through our doors because of other things, and we have to look long and hard at those.
Great. Thank you. So why don't we turn it over? Dad, there's a question back there? We have a microphone going around.
Is there a resource for people who operate public buildings and want to be sure that people do know they can drop off their art, take your classes, that would guide us through the proper way to advertise our activities? Or is that something that somehow we could work on developing? Because I think sometimes we get stuck on language a lot, and it stops progress.
I think, and I'm going to speak from the conservatory's experience, we use Mass Cultural Council. They offer a program called UP, and it is for cultural organizations to look at everything from A to Z in terms of their access points, and that's where we really became aware of sort of that whole welcoming thing. But they have become a warehouse of information for us, and so I would engage in some contact with them and some direct communications to see if you can't get on a list that says, we accept. The other place is the Universal, someone might have to help me here because I always forget. Oh, the Center for Living and Design, I think is what it's called. It's in Boston. It's all about universal design for learning. And they've actually partnered with MCC, and they carry a number of resources as well. So those are at least two, and they cover the entire state. So even though they're based in Boston, it doesn't matter. They're statewide. Alzheimer's Association, they have information that says that as well about what arts resources might be available and who can come and go and hear their hours, and they have a warehousing for that as well.
You said it was called UP?
I'm sorry?
You said it was called UP?
UP, it's a program that's run through the Mass Cultural Council, and it's universal programming is sort of their name for it, but it's universal people, it's universal programs, it's universal places. Everything has to do with access. Contact person there is Charles Baldwin.
Yeah, he's a great resource, and it's interesting because when you ask the question, immediately I have no idea. Where would you go if you're looking for example, all of the arts and culture organizations on the Cape to find out before you go somewhere, what the answers to those questions. It would be something good to work toward. Thank you for the question.
I think this might be a little bit more about how you help your staff welcome people, sort of Alzheimer's. What are the resources for that?
So we've used, so the question is, how do we help our staff, train our staff to work with people, every individual who comes into our building? I say a lot of people who learn differently, but it's just every person who's coming in. Part of it was we accessed some specific staff training through the UP program that we did. We're also partners with the Alzheimer's Association of New England and We have used some of their trainers. I'm actually the staff trainer as well, so I often go and do additional training and then come back. And we work with our staff all the time. We do written communication as reminders, but we're doing regular trainings now so that people aren't forgetting. So once a year for people who have been trained, we're going back to the same things. We're reminding them of what things might look at. We're reminding them of the equipment and the accommodations that we make. And then we're also asking for improvement. They're on the front lines, they're seeing folks. You know, we have people who greet our customers coming in for concerts, and they're taking tickets, and they know what's up. They know that there are certain things that might be in the way.
But where you get trained to train them?
So again, it's through Mass Culture, through the Alzheimer's Association. I do a variety of trainings. My background is a music therapist. Much of this is what we're trained in. So I do a lot of professional development for myself, and then we bring the trainings in or do it in-house. Does that help?
Yeah,
Other questions from the audience? Yes?
Just two things. One is just a bit of information. I don't know if you discussed it, I came in late. There's a great blog called Museum 2.0. And have you discussed that?
No.
Oh, it's a great resource. Long story short, the woman behind the blog has created a new program that she's taking nationwide called Of, By, and For. Of, By, For, put it all together. And basically what she is doing is taking what she has learned about a museum that was dying and turning it into a museum that's thriving, has been about changing the content to be of the people, by the people, and for the people. That also takes into account that if you are dealing with a significant population of, let's say, hearing impaired people, that your programming reflects that, and that they are involved in that process. Lastly, to your point about how do you get training, how do you move forward with this, when one of the theaters I was running, we literally paired with the Alzheimer's Association. We paired with a theater group that specialized, they are a national group that specializes in doing skits with actors who have mental illness, how they live with it. And we brought those people in to be ushers. And the reason we brought them in to be ushers was that it also brought us free training how to deal with these populations. So it was another way to involve the community in the work that we were doing, as well as, frankly, to get firsthand training. And it built our audience base hugely, and it greatly increased the capacity of our organization to deal with diverse populations.
And do you know of any programs on the Cape or in the region similar? I know probably Wheelock is the closest to here. That would be so great.
I can give you the woman that we worked with in Connecticut. She's 2.5 hours away. She runs a group called, oh my God, she's going to kill me. She was on my board at one point. Becca Atkins is her name, I think. I could get the name of her group, but she is a group of all the actors have mental illness, and they tour around the country doing skits about living with mental illness. One of the skits they do is called, it's a spoof, it's a parody called The Sound of Prozac. That kind of thing. So a lot of fun, but she is a great resource for anyone who's looking for help and training in any of those areas, and I can get that information to Julie if anybody wants.
Great.
I
Thank
do
you.
know out of Marshfield, there's a program if you're looking for anything regarding opioids and drug abuse, Drug Story Theater, and it is an interactive theater, and it's geared for high school kids, but they're high school kids who have been addicted, who are addicted, and are in treatment. It's run by Dr. Joe Schrand, but it's called Drug Story Theater, and it's really powerful and good training opportunities.
So, Kari, could you speak a little more about that? Again, I just can't stop thinking about this idea of art as a form of advocating for affordable health care. It's such a, we talk a lot about art in politics, but to have that kind of level of specificity, I think is awesome. So, can you dig into that a little bit more?
I have a lot to say about that. I guess focusing on the Lyme community, which is the community I'm part of and that I work with, it's an interesting thing because even here in Massachusetts, those with mass health often can't get the treatment they need for Lyme disease. And so, I know we're seen as this state that, we have this mass health, it's wonderful, but Lyme is really a political illness, and one of the directors of our center frequently actually compares it to where HIV and AIDS was in the 80s, and that is just poorly understood, and there's a lot of doctors who, believe it or not, don't believe in persistent symptoms of Lyme or chronic Lyme, and you get labeled as mentally ill. And so you really have to fight for treatment. And I left my career teaching, I left the country to get treatment, and I got really mad. And so I think I have a lot of patients that are really mad, and there's even a term out there called Lyme rage, and that can mean a few different things, because Lyme disease can affect the brain, so it can actually cause mental illness. It can cause us to have difficulty regulating our emotions. It can cause difficulty with impulsivity. So you have Lyme rage from the perspective of this organic, physiological thing, but then you also have these people have been shunned from society. Their own families, similar to how they abandoned people with HIV and AIDS, their families are abandoning them because they look fine and they're in bed all day, and they might have mood issues, or they might, they might no longer be able to work, and people, have this thing. I know Cape Cod has a tremendous problem with Lyme. I don't know how many of you out there are familiar with it, but there's a lot of people, myself.
Does anyone not know someone who has had Lyme disease in the room?
Yeah. So when I got it in 2010, I first thought oh, it's no big deal. I had no idea I'd be sick 8 years later, but here we are. I didn't know because nobody told me how devastating it could be. I knew from connecting on social media, and I think social media is a tremendous tool. There's a lot of downsides to it, and that's where I think art plays a huge role, is that I always tell my patients, social media is a double-edged sword when it comes to chronic invisible illness, because you can go on the pages and read all the horror stories and people that are sick and never getting better. Some people are in crisis, and it can be really, really, it can drag you down, down, down. But then you bring art into it, and that's where people connect. And I used to have this thing, and a lot of people too, a lot of families will reach out to me and oh, my son or my brother will talk about Lyme all day, and they'll post about it. They want other people to know. And actually, when we were talking over here about, do we acknowledge disabilities when it comes to displaying artwork? I was sitting here with the thought of oh my gosh, the population I work with, I don't want to speak for everyone, but a lot of people want people to know, I'm sick and I still did this, because that's what's not seen. And so it's an interesting kind of thing, right? Sometimes when I go to family events and I'm late and I'm disheveled, and I, made a recipe that came out horrible, I want people to know that, I felt this way today, and if you could only see how I feel. So it's interesting, but I think art can really, and I think about the ALS challenge all the time, especially where funding's concerned, that ice bucket challenge, I'm constantly in my mind, what can we get to go viral to get people to understand? Because I think, a lot of social movements now, it all starts with art, and that's where eventually more people pay attention, and then we get the funding, because then we get our senators on it, and we call the senators, and that's how eventually it can really work. And so I know I'm talking a lot, so there was a bill, by the way, passed in 2015, that mandated insurance companies to treat Lyme in Massachusetts long-term. And I think that's really important to know about, because I had to wait 5 years to get treatment, and by that time I had brain damage and optic nerve damage because I needed IV antibiotics all along. And it wasn't until 2015 this bill was passed that mandated insurance companies to cover things like IV antibiotic treatment. And our governor almost didn't pass that bill, and I don't want to get too political here, but it really took the people calling their senators, their legislators left and right. It took all of us to override that bill being passed, because it literally passed 2 minutes to midnight, and it saved so many lives. And if it wasn't for me, I always used to like doubt how vocal I should be about this disease. I, thought people would think I was overreactive or trying to get attention, but it took that advocacy and sharing my stories and sharing visuals and getting my family involved to make those calls to really make that difference. And so that's where art can really impact people.
Well, and then I'm thinking about the discussion about inclusiveness and for it not to be inclusive and not to recognize yet there is a political component and an advocacy component, and Andrew's work, it advocates for people in his own community, as well as wanting to just be accepted to work on his own or any other opportunities. So it's almost like they're the two responsibilities that live. Give us some down to Leslie.
The visible component of the positive effects of just letting the world know everything that's really going on. Andrew's part of a gallery in Boston. It's called Art Lifting. Art Lifting was a product of the Harvard Art Lab. I know. And it was originally designed to give a platform to persons that were homeless, which a lot of our homeless population also have different psychological issues. And after really kind of realizing that they sell original artwork, then the income is obviously limited. So they went into the print business. They opened it up then to persons with intellectual disabilities. It grew from, hold on a second.
One of the first.
Yes, we were. And it grew from a handful of artists to now having probably 45 to 50 artists in 17 different states. It's been able to take versus gallery work to the corporate world. And instead of originally when we first started 4 years ago, we were making designer bags and iPhone covers and things like that. It's an online business. Most of the interns are kids that are in the iLab up at Harvard. And we've now opened it up and we've taken it to the corporate world. So in Boston alone, Google, Staples, they have their big corporate headquarters up in that region. They've now opened their own galleries. And it's for their employees. They purchase the work of art lifting artists. They rotate their exhibits. And each piece has a plaque that has a little bit of a capsule story about the artist that's produced it. The response from these employee-based companies is beyond tremendous because they're feeling that they're really meeting a social, moral commitment by supporting programs that are socially, morality, lifting up society. So by really bringing this to the forefront, it has a whole different impact on what's going on. Hartford Insurance Company is another company that's now built its own gallery, and Travelers Insurance is following just behind that as well. I think there's a balance, a really interesting balance on how you can bring the disability awareness to the table without compromising the work and people feeling that it's not of the same value as that of someone else. So I just want to bring that to the table.
Melissa and I
because
had a
it's
conversation
really
about
opening it up.
in the performing arts that same thing, and the audition process, and we talked honestly about some of the challenges, like is it appropriate in an audition form to ask questions such as would you need transportation, because that's something we wouldn't normally do, and but there are other things that we need to think about and try to figure out how we offer a more inclusive experience, and they're never obvious.
No.
I think.
No.
Can I also jump in on that day? Can I also jump in on that day? Go ahead first. Go ahead first. Yeah.
My point with like our art lifting experience has, it's taken his work to places that I would not have been able to get him into. I'm not a small team of 10 interns calling companies and getting their social commitment to support kind of stuff, but I think it's a direction that it's really strongly going in. Art, especially Andrew's two-dimensional work, there's a very, very limited market for that. You have to value the work because of the time that goes into it, as we all know. But now you're up and you're competing against all of the box stores that are selling everything for literally nothing. Everything's just out there and available. It might not be on the forefront for somebody to say, I have to have an original piece hanging in my living room. It's not something that's just really important to everybody. But yet, producing it and knowing that there's a viable means of communicating it is important to the producer. And that brings an important statement. We've had tremendous success with both of his books, which really started off as just compiling his work, putting it together. It's the Art Beyond a Syndrome. And basically the statement is there's a lot more to it besides just the label of a syndrome. This is behind the syndrome. We're using it as an educational tool to say this is what can be out there.
And then I'm going to jump in on that. All right. So, I'm first going to ask Dave if he can backtrack to one of the other pieces, and that is the piece of the face. The piece called Heaven's Still Face.
I didn't understand the question.
I'm first going to ask Dave if he can backtrack to Heaven's Still Face. One second. Yeah. All right. Here we go. So, just want to talk a little bit about, just really want to about what she said. Thank you, Leslie. So anyhow. So anyhow, I came out with 2 books, and volume 1 was the featured, so that there could be something held tangible and present that to galleries and exhibits. And anyhow, the second book was featured with other new stuff. So anyhow, and that book had a title to it. And anyhow, the title of the second book is "And I Close My Eyes," in which was dedicated to my Uncle John, who was diagnosed on Memorial Week of last year with mantle cell lymphoma. He had cancer, and so don't really want to get into that. So anyhow, just recently in September, suddenly in September, I am officially Hall of Fame inductee.
Congratulations.
And anyhow, I am getting won an award in which next month is going to be a dinner. I won the Youth Inspirational Award, and also in the summer, I also took my arts works, artworks even more thorough. I am also got my feet wet into a genre of music. So anyhow, I hope that will turn into a success.
Great.
Which is acapella and voice.
Thank you, Andrew.
And I really want to thank Jason, Berg, and Jared for that, too.
Absolutely.
Shout out to you, Jason.
So, any other questions in our final few moments here, Frank?
I just want to say, Andrew, I love your art.
Thanks, man. What's your name? Frank, thank you very much. Anybody else?
Any other questions from the room?
Andrew, you talked about
Hey, Jay.
bullying. Can you tell us the emotion behind this painting?
So anyhow, the emotion behind this painting was actually what has basically that one has been with me ever since. And anyhow, what that emotion is basically a smile. Basically has been with me ever since. And that's how I founded the writing, which, as I spoke about earlier, finding pieces of writing. And anyhow, that was also how I released my emotions and my tears through writing and through tennis and just I gotta get me down.
Thank you.
And anybody else?
So, before we wrap up, we have a few more minutes. I'd like to, and this question is for all of the panelists, as sort of a parting thought. If you could just think about who has inspired you in the work you do today and why. I know, sorry, I didn't even give them a clue. It's like, bring it on you. or the last book you read.
This is actually easy for me. When I was in high school, my Catholic high school had the Mercy Center down the street, which was, back then, a developmental school for kids, a day school. And we had the option of using our study hall to go and volunteer at Mercy Center. So my freshman year, I decided to go volunteer, and I met Jimmy, who had cerebral palsy, who was nonverbal, and I was with Jimmy all 4 years, and so that was my inspiration. So I went initially to be a PT, and then realized that that's not what I wanted. I didn't want to do that physical piece. I wanted to do the rehab piece. So that was, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Leslie.
It's an interesting question, but I think really probably the guide and the inspiration.
You're probably going to say me.
No, it was our parents.
You're probably going to say my name.
Our parents, my sister's here, and our brother was hit by a car and had a traumatic brain injury. But our parents never set limits on what his abilities could be. At the time of the injury, they gave him a 1 in a million chance of ever being anything in an iron lung, and the following year, my dad had an ice skate. So it never, when Andrew was born, I think the hardest thing was telling my dad that there was a diagnosis that was pending. But it never really occurred to me that we were going to have to live in a box. That just was never an option. So I kind of say our parents did that. And you inspired us.
And I can also contribute to that.
And Andrew, who inspires you?
If I don't shed any tears it would rather be my granddad. Our granddad isn't with us anymore. He hospitalized since I was 4 due to heart failure, and also just recently just recently, I know, I'm telling that. So, and also, anyhow, recently, in all of us, we need a mentor. We need a role model. And there are so many of the guys who I am, since the summer, who I really looked at and watched, and all of a sudden, this was out of the blue in the second act. So anyhow, through this guy, he found that role model and mentor when he was singing, when he took the lead on the Beatles song. So anyhow, not only my granddad, but also a really cool dude named William Wolf. He was really amazing. He is just really so inspirational attitude.
Great, thank you very much. Eve?
Do 2 months. Yeah, I've been so lucky to be doing this for 33 years, and you know, I see the power of music every day, and I'm still getting aha moments. And I've worked with so many different people, but I think and it's actually a group of kids who probably have informed my work more than anybody. I worked at the Mass Hospital School in Canton for about 12 years. And it's a school run by DPH. Kids go there because they're pretty neurologically involved. And the majority of the kids have muscular dystrophy, so we know that their lifespan is pretty short. And I watched these kids through high school who absolutely knew their own fate. They watched their friends die. They watched themselves lose skill moment after moment after moment. And their attitude was unbelievably positive and bright and supportive. And I think for me, that just personally has always made me go, you know, I go home, I say, thank you, God. And yeah, I have a headache, but oh my goodness. And so for me, it's probably that group of kids who have really informed my work and inspired me to continue. I have beautiful moments every day with all my clients, but those are the kids.
Thank you. Kari?
So yeah, I guess I was thinking I'd take the rebellious approach and not answer with one person too, but say really community in general. I guess one of the things I didn't mention before was that my first year of grad school, you know, after I decided I could no longer teach and, you know, I was getting through grad school part-time, was in 2013, and I was pretty struggling to get up that day. My brother was running the Boston Marathon, and my mom and I were at the finish line, and we were in between both bombs, and it was really, really challenging to get through that. I had definitely symptoms of acute stress disorder, and again, it was like, I have 2 invisible illnesses now, you know, where I looked okay. But what really moved me was how the community came together, and you see that across the world. In impoverished nations, sometimes they have the most beautiful music and they have the most beautiful art, and a lot of the times that's a product of you know, great, tremendous tragedies and challenges that these communities have had to work through. And just shout out to Boston after the marathon. I mean, I noticed, like, it gave me so much inspiration for everything that I'm trying to do for the community of those with invisible illness now. Like, they had the music, they had beautiful, beautiful tributes with flowers and sneakers in the shape of the heart, and you saw so much healing through art. And so I would say community, and especially Boston, and how we all came together.
What a great way to wrap it all up. And I'm inspired by all of you today, and the work you all do is so important, and thank you. And I'd like to thank Kari and Eve, Andrew, Leslie, and Melissa for being on the panel, and thank you guys for being here. Thanks so much.